Well, hello everybody, and welcome into GC Live here on Gamecock Central. Kendall Smith and Jack Veltri coming at you live, hence the name GC Live, here on this Wednesday afternoon. Excited to have each and every one of you here as we talk some South Carolina football. A big win last weekend over Texas A&M. A big game coming up this weekend against Vanderbilt. We are going to get into all of it here today. But Jack, first and foremost, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Kendall. It's been a kind of better week, I guess, because South Carolina won and everyone's feeling good and stuff. But now you got to turn the page to a really big game this weekend, and we'll see how it goes down. Got a lot to talk about today, but I will also ask, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm super excited about the game this weekend and very happy with the way that things went last weekend. You were obviously there, and I know a lot of people watching this show right now were at the game or watching it on TV like I was. I have to say, South Carolina looked very good on TV on Saturday. They were fantastic. There were so many other schools and fan accounts from other schools that were saying, hey, we need to kind of get on board with what South Carolina is doing and what they're up to down there in Columbia. So really impressive stuff from the Gamecocks, and obviously hoping to carry that into this week. But it's against a Vanderbilt team that is a little different than what we may have been used to these past few years. Typically Vanderbilt, bottom of the SEC, a team you don't really worry about, kind of that one team you look at your schedule, and this has been the case for years past, and you're like, yeah, that's an SEC win. But this year, no longer the case. Vanderbilt has been pretty good all season. They've had some impressive wins, and they've got a good group and a good thing going for them up there in Nashville, Tennessee. You're going to be there, Jack. We're going to talk about what the coordinators had to say earlier today, Clayton White and Dowell Loggains, about South Carolina's defense and offense heading into this weekend. But I just want to start it off with this, right? So we've talked a lot about this Vanderbilt game. You don't want it to be a sleeper if you are South Carolina, because you're the Gamecocks. You're coming off of a win against Oklahoma, a bye, and then a win against Texas A&M. Do you think that could potentially be the case this weekend, Jack?
I don't think so. I think they know. Debo Williams had some really great quotes, and he said, like, there's nothing to be happy about. Like, they are 5-3. They could be potentially 8-0 right now, maybe 7-1 more realistically, but they're not. And so, look, they have work to do to be better. And Shane, I asked Shane about it the other day because I kind of, what you alluded to there, Kendall. I think back to 2022 when they just gotten. I mean, you were there. I mean, they got their butts kicked by Florida. Yep. And no one gave them a chance against Tennessee. I mean, I can't remember what the spread was in that game, but they were at least like 3 touchdown underdogs in that game. And then they went out there and won, stormed the field. And then it's the kind of the boat we're in now of like, okay, they picked up the big win. What are they going to do going on the road this week? And 2 years ago, they went to Clemson and pulled off a really big win. Granted, even though Vanderbilt's having a great year, they're not Clemson in terms of the rivalry. They're not ranked, like Clemson was at the time. So this is a big matchup for South Carolina, and it's a similar spot. And obviously that Clemson game, South Carolina won, proved a lot of people were wrong again. So that's kind of the goal this week. And this is a much better Vanderbilt team, as you alluded to, going bowling for the first time since, I believe, 2017. They are not to be trifled with. They're a good football team, and they are going to be a real challenge for South Carolina. The key is, can you do basically what you did last week, but just maybe, I don't even know if it has to be any better. Just repeat performance, essentially, I think is what South Carolina needs to be striving for.
So I have to ask before we continue on with the show and talk a little bit more about Vanderbilt and what the coordinators had to say. Were you anywhere near the field? Obviously, you were in the press box, but were you anywhere near the field when South Carolina fans stormed the field after the Texas A&M win?
So I guess I have these clips saved from when I went live on Sunday. I'll play them real quick, but hold on. The scene of the crime. Holy smokes. Look at all this. Wow. So does that answer your question
Look
there?
at you with the producing skills.
Oh, I know.
That's what I have to say
I did
first and foremost.
I did a whole behind the scenes vlog, like how you used to do.
I was gonna say, I saw you started doing that.
I've
Thank
taken
you
a
for
lot of
continuing the
inspo.
legacy.
Yes, I've taken a lot of inspo from you, and laying the foundation. Now Nashville this weekend. The plan is to do another one, so that should be a lot of fun, depending on what happens. But no, like seriously, like I was not on the field live. Like obviously, I'm up in the press box and stuff. But after the game, like the gates were open to go on the field and stuff, and obviously had to check it out. Like it's seriously just crazy that it happened again. And look, I think you were covering the game in 22, but 22 for me, I mean, that was my last game as a student, and I wasn't. I don't even think I was interning yet at GC at the time. Maybe I'm wrong. Actually, no, I think I was, but I wasn't. It was you and Sauls and Colin. So you guys were covering the game, and I was just like, I'll go to the game. They ended up winning, and storming the field after was a lot of fun. But it's a great opportunity. And look, South Carolina did what they had to do. Now you got to go out here and repeat this type of performance, because look, the one thing about South Carolina, just across all sports, has there ever really been consistency outside of women's basketball and baseball in the 2010s? Like honestly, with football, Wes brought it up to me the other day. When they beat Alabama in 10, they went on to lose to Kentucky, I think the week after. So it can look, for South Carolina, it can happen again, but you have to play your best football. All right, I believe we just lost Kendall for a second, so I'll freestyle then for a minute while we wait and see what's going on with her. I'll try to get that figured out, but anyway. So look, South Carolina. Look, Saturday was really something, huh? Like I talked about this on Sunday Reset. But anyway, so Saturday, look, people deserve this, right? I mean, there we go. You get
it? I got kicked out.
Yeah, because your screen froze for a second. I was like, oh no, like this is not. I've had a few issues with using StreamYard lately, I guess, with stuff freezing up. So it's we're prepared for these moments, I guess.
Well, I have to say, I loved your behind the scenes videos there. I think that's fantastic. And honestly, what a win for South Carolina. And it goes back to our point, Jack. And I don't want to harp on this for the entire show, but I tweeted it and a lot of people interacted with this tweet. I'm tired of hearing people speak poorly of Shane Beamer.
Speak to the gospel.
Enough is enough. Okay? Enough is enough. I think he's done a great job. He obviously loves the school. He loves the program. It has undoubtedly improved since he's gotten to South Carolina. So that's all I'm going to say on that. But a great win for the Gamecocks. And they need another one this weekend coming up in Nashville, Tennessee. The good news about Vanderbilt is that the atmosphere is not that daunting, in my opinion, given I haven't been back to Vanderbilt since they have kind of gotten back on the right track. And obviously this year has been different. So I could stand corrected. I don't know if the stadium has a different feel now because they're a little bit better. But when I was there a couple of years ago, South Carolina ended up becoming bowl eligible in Nashville. It wasn't really like a typical SEC environment that I had been on the field for. An experience at Florida or at Georgia or even Kentucky was a noticeable difference from Vandy. So South Carolina has that going for them, but certainly a lot of talk heading into this weekend. And we heard today from the coordinators for South Carolina, offensive coordinator Dowell Loggains and defensive coordinator Clayton White. Jack, you took it all in. You heard what they had to say. What stood out to you most?
Well, you mentioned Vanderbilt in good detail there. And by the way, I think they are just it's nice to see. Look, they've been the doormat or the dormant of the SEC cellar dwellers for, forever now. And it's nice to see the little guys start having a little bit of success in this conference that's always so tough. But speaking of Vanderbilt, Dowell Loggains and Clayton White both spoke very highly of Diego Pavia, Pavia, who is Vanderbilt's star quarterback, who's been awesome for them this year. And Dowell said Pavia's a baller, and he reminds him of when Dowell coached Johnny Manziel, Johnny Football from his Texas A&M days when he was in Cleveland with the Browns for his little short stint in the NFL. So basically, Pavia makes plays. He's making everyone around him better on the field. And that's kind of what Clayton White had to say, too. Like, when you watch the tape on him, there's just a lot of things that can be surprising. He makes these Houdini-type plays. And if you remember watching Johnny Manziel back in the day, it's kind of a lot like that. Like, this is a guy that is not going to have a ton of turnovers. He's going to rush for a lot of yards. And, heck, he leads Vanderbilt in rushing yards. And he only has 3 interceptions this year with 15 touchdowns. So this is a guy that can make things really tough on South Carolina if they're not careful. I will say, to kind of go against that point, though, South Carolina has faced we talked about this last week, I think, with Marcel Reed and Texas A&M. Carolina's defense has faced so many different styles of quarterbacks throughout the season. Oh, and by the way, they face Lenore Sellers and Robbie Ashford every week in practice. So, that gives you just about as good of a look as possible. But they've already had success against these mobile quarterbacks like Jalen Milroe and Marcel Reed last week. I mean, look, I'm not going to say they're going to be able to do it again this week because Pavia has just proven to be really good for the Doors this season. But I do think there's something to be said about the way Carolina's defense just plays well against anything you throw at them. They're going to make the most of it. And even when they struggled last week, I thought Carolina stepped up enough to where, hey, they shut out Texas A&M in the second half. So it's going to be tough going to Vanderbilt for sure. The crowd, I don't know how it's going to be. I expect a lot of Carolina fans to be there. But I think South Carolina, as long as you neutralize Pavia a little bit, especially in the run game, you can definitely win this game.
Well, before we continue any further, we got to give a shout out to our presenting sponsor of GC Live. You guys know who that is, Clint Hammond, and he's fantastic, Jack.
Yeah, so if you are kind of in a situation like one of us where you're living in an apartment not right now, but maybe you're looking to take that next step forward and maybe you're looking to buy a home, or maybe you already own a home and you want help with your mortgage, but you don't know where to start in any of these scenarios. Well, I got good news for you. Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans can go ahead and help you out. He's been in the mortgage industry since long before either of us were here at Gamecock Central, and he's a lifelong Gamecock fan, longtime supporter of all of our Gamecock Central Live programs, hence why you always see his presenting sponsor right above us up there, so you can't miss it. It's right up there. If you want help and you're looking to figure out where to start, give him a call, 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597, or you can go to ClintHammond.com. So, as always, big thank you to Clint for being a really wonderful sponsor of all of our GC Live programs.
We're kind of all over the board here today, Jack, because I'm just thinking of things as they come. You and I have not talked since South Carolina beat Texas A&M. I texted you during the game, and it seemed
that was so surprising. I'm like, what is she texting me for?
I was just enjoying the game. I was like, let me send Jack a real quick text and kind of check in on him and see how he's doing. The state of Clemson and South Carolina, very different on Saturday.
Yeah.
In South Carolina when it came to college football.
Yeah. I had a tweet that got a boatload of traction. It got to a point where I didn't even know this was a Twitter thing, but there's a Twitter account that's called Make a Quote, I guess, and it's got like 7 million followers or whatever, and like they just randomly made a quote of the tweet I had, which was basically Clemson fans throwing bottles on the field. Meanwhile, South Carolina is getting ready to storm the field after a great win. What a day in the state of South Carolina. Something like that. Look, it's kind of ironic, right? Because not to get all about Clemson here, but Clemson, don't they always trash South Carolina for being the team that leaves games early and they throw stuff on the field and stuff? And here's Clemson doing all the things that they accuse South Carolina fans of doing. I think that's just kind of ironic. It's funny humor. And look, I mean, I don't care what Clemson does. Like if they win, great. If they lose, great. Like who cares? But I think it's just kind of ironic that all of the things that they say South Carolina does, which in some cases might be true, but in other cases it's like you're just digging yourself a big hole, especially with South Carolina pulling off the upset that they did.
Yeah, and I know that fans are counting down to that Clemson South Carolina game. You know when it's coming up, end of November. We're excited for it, but we can't get too ahead of ourselves because obviously
One game.
Vanderbilt this weekend. Something Dowell Loggains said today that stood out to me was the conversation he had with Lenora Sellers before last week was like, we're not going to ease into this game. It's more about the attack of things. And, kind of going in with that mentality of like right off the jump, you want to be the team that kind of sets the tone. And he was talking about that today in his conversations with Lenora Sellers. Lenora's played fantastic last Saturday, and it was so much fun to watch, just to see him use every ability that he has. And he's so talented. And I think this season, he has received some feedback that has been, quite frankly, a little bit harsh, especially for such a young player. So to have him go out there and to do what he did was fantastic. Obviously, that conversation with Dowell Loggains paid off. What did you think about it? And, are you looking at this the same way as, like you said earlier in the show, South Carolina just needs to replicate kind of what they did last week? Same thing. Like, you want to see the same thing out of Lenora Sellers against Vandy.
Before I get to my answer, I have to ask. I asked this to Shane yesterday. What was your initial reaction to Sellers trucking that one dude on that third down run?
I think I was just like,
That was seriously. It was
like my
whoa,
jaw dropped. I was like crazy.
That was wild.
But hey, hats off to him.
Yeah,
physical play, like it's a big
240. This is
stay healthy. That's all I'm asking. Stay healthy.
No, seriously. But kind of answering your question now, yeah, look, the mindset, it makes sense, right? Because in a game like this, you can ease into a game and find a way to win. But isn't it much easier when you're on the attack and you score first and you're the underdog in this game? Doesn't that put pressure on what A&M, who's on the road in this game, has to do? That is monumental if you score first. And South Carolina came out swinging right out of the jump. I mean, they scored on the first drive in 11 plays, and Sellers was able to get that touchdown run. So that only helped his confidence. I mean, if let's say, for instance, you fall behind early and it's like, oh, man, here we go. South Carolina's struggling. Sellers can't figure it out. What does that do for a guy's confidence? It does nothing good. So, look, he had a great week of practice, like Loggains said, and they attacked this game. They didn't hold back any punches. The analogy he had today was that they didn't want to make this a 15-round fight. They wanted to go for the knockout blow, and I got to give them a lot of credit and give D'Lo a ton of credit. He did a great job play calling in this game. And look, a lot of you probably listening, I've probably given him haven't cut him a lot of slack because of how things have gone this year. I'm sure a lot of you have wanted him fired. I see it all the time. It is what it is, right? But he's doing a good job right now, and he's getting the most out of these players. And you can just say, oh, it's all the players, not him, but it's a two-way street. Someone has to be able to call the plays and know what works for certain guys. And give credit to D'Lo. Sellers' progression from week one, where he was this first time starting quarterback, struggling to make throws, indecisive. Now he's out here trucking guys and making big plays, learning from his mistakes, and doing a great job. And William Jones brings up a great point. I mean, it was a few weeks ago after the Alabama game, I remember a lot of people saying, oh, Sellers isn't the guy. The experiment's over. This guy stinks. He sucks, this and that. We're getting comments like this now where South Carolina can't win without Sellers. I wholeheartedly agree. Lenoris is he's the guy for this team. I was going to say the glue, but there's so many different guys that if you didn't have this guy, the whole puzzle kind of falls apart. But Sellers is integral to what South Carolina has done this entire season.
Yeah, I would maybe use the term backbone, similar to
totally.
but the backbone, you think of it of the offense and just the way he's been able to develop this season. I think that's a huge testament to not only him and his work ethic as a player, but also Dowell Loggains as well, and being able to develop him as a quarterback. That's obviously something that we've seen throughout the season, and I'm really loving all of the hype that is going on around Lenoris. I think it's
Mount Rushmore. That's wild. Mount Rushmore for Lenora Sellers. That's in terms of Gamecock football, considering he's got 2 years to go. Would you put him on your Mount Rushmore when it's all said and done?
For South Carolina football, I guess only time will tell. We'll have to see. But I think he does have so much upside, and he's such a talented player. And this is something that I've been saying, not to be like, oh, I've been saying this for a while, but like since he was in high school, and clearly the game changes, right? Like a lot from when you're in high school to college. So sometimes making that jump isn't always a linear path for some people, and sometimes it's very difficult. And some people make the jump and you can't even tell. Like obviously, think about guys like Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, right? He makes that jump to college football, and he is one of the best receivers in the entire country. And for Lenoris, to start off, there were a couple of shaky spots, but he's always been talented. And I'll give the credit to that, for Wes, because Wes Mitchell has been saying that for years and years and years. They cover these guys since, the beginning essentially of their high school careers until they end up committing or maybe not committing, but they're covering them throughout the process. And he always had said, Lenoris is great. And he dealt with a couple of things injury-wise in high school that kind of, I think, held him back from maybe being recognized the way that he should have been recognized for how talented he is. So shout out to Lenoris Sellers, not to go on a little rant there, but I knew that he always had it in him and that ability. It was so nice to see that shine through this past weekend. Now, in terms of this weekend, and Dowell Loggains said it, can South Carolina handle prosperity? That's what you have to look at yourself and ask, right? You come off of the win against Oklahoma. You have a bye week. You beat Texas A&M. You now head into Vanderbilt. South Carolina is really trying to get this win streak working. That would be a month straight of positive vibes for South Carolina football if you include the bye week, which is amazing. I can't remember the last time there was a month straight of positive vibes in season. So if they're able to win this weekend, that continues. Dowell Loggains asks, can you handle the prosperity? He said it's going to be a 4-quarter battle and a difficult challenge. But I think if you're South Carolina, you've got to carry that same mentality as you did into this past week against Texas A&M. You got to come out. You got to be ready to go. Hit them with the explosive plays. Get things going offensively and put some pressure on Vanderbilt and make them work to catch up to you, Jack.
No, most definitely. I've loved everything. They've said literally just about all the right things this week. It's not just Dowell. It's not just Clayton. It's the players. It's Shane. They're all saying the right things. And the common theme I've gotten out of them this week is that they need to treat this like it's going 1-0. And that ultimately is what it is, right? Like, yeah, you're 5-3 on the year, and you could get to a bowl game this weekend by winning a 6th game. But in hindsight, you're not worrying about what's the playoffs. You're not worrying about what you did before. You're just focused on winning this game this weekend. And I think that's the right mindset to have. And I think that's what's going to help them so much against this team. Now, granted, Vanderbilt's playing great football as well, and it's going to be a challenge. But isn't that basically every week in the SEC at this point? Like, South Carolina's gone through so much this season. I think they're playing their best football at the right time. And look, people are going to remember this team for the way they played in November. And so far, they're 1-0 this month. Now, can they make it 2-0? But in hindsight, it's really, can they go 1-0 again this week? And I think that is going to be the challenge for them. But I think they got everything going right now that they need to. Like, the defense continues to play really well. The offense is starting to look a lot more explosive, more dynamic, I think is the right word to use. Just a lot of good things going on right now. And then special teams is playing a lot better. So I think Carolina's in a good spot right now. And it's just about, hey, can you go out here and kind of, like I said before, replicate what you did last week, but can you show basically no let up essentially?
All right. Offensively, what else? Was there anything else that Dowell Loggains said that you want to talk about? He obviously touched on Rocket Sanders. He talked about the offensive line as well. Anything there that you want to hit on before we kind of transition our way over onto the defensive side of things, Jack?
Yeah, I think last thing I'll probably bring up is the thing he said about Mao Bennett. Because, look, Mao, we don't know what his status is going to be yet for this weekend. We'll find out a little bit more detail on the SEC availability report when that comes out tonight. So be sure to stay locked into GC for all that. I'm sure Wes Mitchell, myself, somebody will be handling that story later on. But look, South Carolina, when Mazio's out there, he's been very good. And even if you feel like he's done good, I mean, Dowell brought it up today. If you ask Mao Bennett right now how he thinks he's been playing, he'd probably tell you he hasn't done enough. And look, he plays a tough position where he's in the slot and you have to be able to think quickly and understand coverages. And part of what comes with playing that type of position is being fearless. And if you've ever spoken to him, if you've ever watched the way this dude approaches the game, I think he's probably the best blocking receiver they have, but he's also a really good target in this offense when he's out there and healthy. And he is a fearless guy, like absolutely for sure. Dowell said he's just getting started and he just needs to keep taking the right steps to be better and grow up fast. So I've liked what I've seen from Mazio. You hope he's out there and he's healthy this weekend, but even if not, even if he misses this week, it's probably not the end of the world because you have other guys out there that can go in and step up. And it's not just a one-man show, but you definitely want Mazio out there as soon as possible, and hopefully he's good to go for this weekend.
Well, Jack, we will get into the defensive side of things here in just a moment, but I do want to talk about the first batch of playoff rankings that came out. Your thoughts, feelings, and opinions. Go right on ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to dive too much into it just because I spoke my piece on it yesterday. If you go after we're done on this stream, y'all, go ahead and watch the quick 4-minute YouTube video I put out on GC about it yesterday. The short Cliff Notes answer is I think it's not completely shocking that they got left out of the rankings. They have 3 losses, but when you look at other teams that are in the rankings like Louisville and Missouri, even Vanderbilt got left out, which I think is a little bit ridiculous, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I think South Carolina is a better football team than Missouri. I think Vanderbilt is a better football team than Missouri. I also think South Carolina is a better football team than Louisville. They beat these 2 teams in all the metrics for sure. And that's how the playoff committee judges teams, right? By metrics and what you've done for me lately, not what you did so many weeks ago. South Carolina's got the best win on their schedule right now. And Louisville just beat Clemson, who Clemson obviously is not as good as we once thought because they have a blowout loss to Georgia and then they just lost to Louisville. So, and even with Missouri, there's 2 common opponents on the schedule that South Carolina has also played much better against. You look at what Missouri's done. They lost 41-10 to Texas A&M, and then they also lost 34-0 against Alabama, who, mind you, South Carolina went down to the wire with the Tide in Tuscaloosa, and South Carolina beat the snot out of Texas A&M by 24 points. So, look, it is what it is. It doesn't really matter that South Carolina got left out. It's just the first batch. You have 5 more rounds of this to go before Selection Sunday on December 8th. But I think for South Carolina, it would have been nice to be put in to help you show where you're at with how much progress you have made. But, at the same time, maybe it's a good thing that they've been left out. Maybe it will just add more fuel to the fire.
Yeah, give them a little bit more motivation. Jack, I love how you say, I'm not going to get into this. I'm not going to get into it.
I say that, and then,
and then Jack goes on like a 2.5-minute rant about the playoff rank.
What's your thoughts on it? What do you think?
I mean, I think everything you said is totally fair, and you pretty much hit the nail on the head for everything I was going to say. There were some teams on there where I was like, whew, I don't know. I'm not going to get into the whole Clemson situation being number 23. I'm just not.
Let's hear.
I'm not going to get into all of that. You guys can listen to what Jack said and understand that I have very similar feelings about a lot of what he said. I think the good news is for South Carolina, it's still early on and they still have more games to be played, and this can be used as motivation, just as Jack said. But I do like to give Jack a hard time when he says, I'm really quickly, and he does this not a lot, but
I do this so frequently.
He does it sometimes where he'll say, I'm not going to get too into it. I don't want to, go too crazy. And then 3 minutes later,
I need to set like a timer on my phone of like, okay, when a minute's up, it's up.
I love it. Honestly, I appreciate it. And I like it better, that way because we get the in-depth answer. I say the same thing to Wes. Wes and I did a show one time where I timed Wes on his answer. So anyways, and I know I talk too much too. Like, we talk for a living. There have been plenty of people out there who have commented on Gamecock Central videos that say I talk too much. So
hey, it's not
anyone
bad.
who is watching that and thinks I talk too much, sorry. but I'm
Yeah,
not
sorry.
sorry.
Yeah,
You're watching
it's all
anyways.
good. You're still here listening, so that's the
Exactly.
important part.
Okay, well, we'll get into everything else here in just a second, but we've got another sponsor that we want to shout out. No more Yankees season for
Oh
Veltri. I don't want to bring it up.
gosh,
This is not, you can't say Yankees anymore. Now you have to talk about the Islanders when you talk about this.
God, the Islanders.
And we'll do an Islanders check-in after the app.
Don't even ask me about the Islanders because, quite frankly,
They won yesterday.
Yeah, I saw. Quite frankly, I have not been able to watch it all this season. Look, hockey's like that one sport where I'll watch when it gets kind of closer to the end, but like every game, nah.
Jack, you can't. No, come on. You got to be a true fan of the New York Islanders.
It's hard to be a fan of the Islanders right now. Anyway, let's get into the second sponsor of the day and cut the Islanders talk for a second. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in all of North America. They're the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And then, of course, you'll watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks has quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. It's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Now, I would not recommend putting any of your hard-earned money on the New York Islanders because more times than not, they're going to let you down. Now, what I will recommend, and I would say Kendall would probably like this a lot, is put your money on the Canes. I feel like the Hurricanes are a good team this season. They're doing a lot of good. Heck, even put it on the Florida Panthers. Shout out the Checkers. There's a lot of good things going on in hockey right now, but it's not even just hockey. You can't bet on the Yankees, unfortunately. You can't put your money on them. They're out of the playoffs. Baseball season's over. But I will say, NBA is going on, college hoops, men's, women's, NFL, college football. The options are endless, and that is the great part about PrizePicks. So, if you're liking what I'm saying and you want to get involved in the game, just go to PrizePicks.com and download the PrizePicks app, use code GC, that stands for Gamecock Central, on screen right now to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineup. So, as always, and unfortunately the Yankees are out and the Islanders stink, but I fully recommend using PrizePicks. So we want to thank PrizePicks for being a wonderful sponsor of Gamecock Central.
It's okay. Baseball will be back before you know it.
Don't even give me that. Baseball will be back. It
will. And I think maybe I feel that way because I work in baseball. So I'm like already looking at the clock. I'm like, oh my gosh, like so much time has already passed in the off season. Like we're so close to opening day and I'm already like starting my spring training plans, like when I'm going to spring training, when I'll be in Arizona. So I'm like in my mind, it's already here because once Christmas and the holidays are over, I'm going to spring training.
It's literally here. And you know what's crazy? I saw this tweet today. Gamecock baseball opening day is 100 days away. I was like, whoa, it's that soon. Mm-hmm. It's around the corner, but hockey season sucks right now. It's brutal.
I'm enjoying hockey season.
Oh, okay.
The Checkers are doing amazing. They're crushing it. The Florida Panthers are doing well. And the Carolina Hurricanes, my team in my home state of North Carolina, they're doing really well too. And I think a lot of people were expecting that to not be the case for the Canes this year. They lost a couple of key pieces of their roster from last season, but the guys they've picked up have been amazing. Marty Natchez, Mr. Clutch, once again, last night comes through for the Canes. Anyways, this is not a show about hockey, but we do like to throw that in when we talk about PrizePicks just to get a little feel for how Jack is feeling about his teams.
Oh, let's just talk about this defense.
Okay, defensively, we heard from Clayton White earlier today, and I think the thing that stands out about Vanderbilt from an offensive standpoint is their ability to convert on third down. That's something Clayton White brought up. How much of a concern is that for you, Jack?
Well, they are very good on third down. And if you go back to, I believe it's the Alabama game, the notorious upset of that game where Vanderbilt was just doing everything it wanted to in that game. They out-yardaged Alabama. They converted on third downs. Heck, they were 12 of 18 on third down in that game. That is remarkable. And that does not happen all the time. And obviously it hasn't happened like that all season for Vanderbilt. But this is still a very good team when it comes down to those situations. And I think for South Carolina, they've been very good at getting off the field. And even when teams decide to go for it on fourth down. You saw it against A&M when they went for it three times on 4th and 1. A&M got stuffed at the line twice. So to say that South Carolina can't make those stops again would be crazy. I think they can go out there and definitely do it. It's just I feel like Vanderbilt's probably going to watch the tape on what A&M did wrong on those plays, and they're going to be like, okay, we gotta convert on third down. That's where we're at our money, and I feel like that's what we're probably going to see from Vanderbilt is a necessity, a requirement to you got to be able to convert on third downs because if you get into these fourth down situations against this team, you might be in trouble.
Well, obviously, with the Vanderbilt offense, there is the one name that sticks out, Diego Pavia. He's been amazing all season long, and he makes those plays where you're like, how did he even do that? And Clayton White talked about it. You mentioned it earlier in the show, like the Houdini plays of like, wow, like that is not something that an average quarterback can do. You have to be a really talented guy to be able to do what he does. And he does it on a consistent basis. So for South Carolina's defense that has been so good all season long and has really, performed well game in and game out, what do you think, Jack, that they can do to limit Pavia as much as humanly possible?
Well, as much as humanly possible, that'd be crazy. I would say, kind of like I mentioned before with Marcel Reed and Jalen Milroe, I think you try to take away his legs as best as possible. Is that going to be easy? No, absolutely not. Like Pavia, I don't know if I can argue that he's the best kind of mobile quarterback in this conference, but he's a really good one. Like, again, leads his team in rushing, 563 yards, 4 touchdowns. And he's also completed 62% of his passes, and he doesn't really turn the ball over a ton. He's also only been sacked 11 times. So Vanderbilt's doing a great job around him. Like, they have just been a really tough team to stop throughout the season. And again, Vanderbilt goes, I think, as far as Pavia goes. So if you're able to take him out of the run game, make him not as effective, I think you really have a great chance because then you're betting on him to throw well with his arm. And yeah, we've seen him throw pretty well this season, but there's been games where he hasn't been great throwing the ball. Like go back to Auburn last week. I know he threw for 2 touchdowns, but he completed only 41% of his passes on 9 of 22 attempts. So there is a chance, like if you hold him to that and you keep him out of the end zone a good bit, I feel like South Carolina is going to be able to win this game because, look, Auburn was able to neutralize them pretty well in that game last week. I think South Carolina is going to present a lot of issues on defense for this Vanderbilt offense. And at the same time, South Carolina is going to got to get going on their end of the offense like they did last week. So I think it's a good recipe to beat this team is playing good defense, playing complementary football. But Pavia, you never know what you're going to get with him. He is a really, really talented player. And again, he definitely reminds you of a Johnny Manziel with the way he plays. And he has been a super exciting player to watch this season.
Yeah, he's been so much fun to watch this season. Probably the one player like outside of South Carolina for me in the SEC that I have just been really, really enjoying watching on a weekly basis and just kind of seeing what he's been able to do and how he was able to do this without a ton of people really expecting that too much at the beginning of the season. So I think that's a really neat thing. And it's exciting for South Carolina to have the chance to become bowl eligible this weekend against Vanderbilt. Jack, I have to say, I'm very proud of myself. I sent you my picks immediately. I've already sent them to you this week.
I know. I saw that. I was like, whoa, you go, girl. Like, wow, that's crazy. I think you might have been the first one, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm usually pretty late to the party on bringing you.
Oh, you were the first. Congratulations. The only person that sent picks to me on Monday. So congrats.
Well, I'm curious, we don't have to talk about it all right now because obviously we will have an article coming out on GamecockCentral.com. So be sure to check that out where we kind of give our picks for not only the South Carolina game this weekend, but for a bunch of other games happening in college football. But what is your gut feeling telling you about this game, Jack?
Well, my gut feel was right last week going with South Carolina. I was very hesitant to make that pick at first. I'm like, this team, they're not more talented, but they got the job done. I think South Carolina is going to win this weekend. I don't know what the score is going to be. You can find that out on Friday whenever it comes to mind. But I do think you do all the little things right. You play well on offense. You play well on special teams. You play well on defense. Play good complementary football. Play your brand of football. You will have no problem winning this game. Is Vanderbilt a tough team? Yes. Are they much better this year? Yes. But just I think you have played a lot better than them this year in some regard. Look, Alabama game aside, this is still a Vanderbilt team that not too long ago lost to Georgia State. This is a team that beat Ball State, I think they're like a MAC school, by 10 points. South Carolina's had their own troubles this year, but when they are keeping the mistakes off the field, when they are not having a million penalties or they're not turning the football over, you get a game like Texas A&M last week and Oklahoma. So keep doing that, and I think you'll be on the path to winning this game. What about you? What do you think?
I feel good about it. I think the last time South Carolina was at Vanderbilt was a good thing. We talked about this last week. Like, you obviously can't compare seasons, but what happened the last time Texas A&M was at South Carolina? We saw similar performance this past weekend. So hoping for more of that, hoping to become bowl eligible. I think they know what's on the line. You know, it's something that Clayton White talked about today. Shane Beamer has always emphasized the importance of finishing a season off very strong and making sure that you perform well in the month of November, because it will have implications for bowl games and postseason. So, yeah, I think that South Carolina understands the magnitude of this game, and I think they want to get over the hump. Like, 6 wins, you want to get over the hump. This is a chance to do it. It doesn't necessarily get easier. I mean, I know you have Wofford on the schedule, so you kind of look at that as a 6th win, barring unforeseen circumstances. We don't want to guarantee anything around here, but just saying, you know, most people I think would assume that would be the win that would at least send you to a bowl game if you don't happen to beat Vanderbilt this weekend. But I think they want to get it done. And I think that they are rolling right now. They're the best they've been all season in all 3 phases. So my gut tells me that I think South Carolina will come out with a win this weekend. And they've been performing really well as of late, which is exciting. But Jack, curious to know what your travel plans are. What's the vibe for you in Nashville, Tennessee? Because now we are fully in crossover season.
The vibe. Well, I'm not covering basketball on Friday. I'm going to base. There's a baseball scrimmage out in Charleston tomorrow. So going out there, assuming the game gets played with the weather and all that. And then Friday morning, you know, and with the whole hurricane happening, it's kind of screwed up how travel works. So we're going to be taking CJ, intern, and I about a 7.5-hour drive out to Nashville. It's going to be a long trip. CJ was already telling me he wants to go to Broadway. I'm like, oh, man. Broadway. I think we've had this conversation. Been there, done that. It's cool. I'm just ready to get this weekend going, get it in, get it out. And this drive is what I'm dreading the most. It's going to be a long drive for a football game. Like, I'd much rather fly, but under the circumstances, that's just not realistic.
Yeah, it is a long drive and a tough drive for sure, just to kind of lock in for that long and do it. So you're going to have to make a stop several times to stretch it out. When we would do those long drives, Colin would stop like every once in a while. And sometimes he did like some yoga. I would be like, hey, do this like yoga pose to like center yourself and get back in the focus that you need to finish the drive. But yeah, I get it. You know, I love Nashville. I think it's a super fun city. I've been there quite a bit recently. But if you kind of get to know Nashville a little bit better, you realize there are a lot of places outside of Broadway
that's very true. That's very true. If it was only Broadway, I would never go back to Nashville. Like, Broadway is cool when you go every once in a while. But considering I just went for a few days in March for the SEC basketball tournament, I'm like, I really don't want to go back. But it's we'll see. It's going to be a fun time, I think, and hopefully Carolina comes out with a win.
Well, we shall see, and we will keep you all updated on GamecockCentral.com. That's where we have all that you need to know. And today we talked about what the coordinators said. We talked about a good amount of it, but not all of it. So a lot of those quotes, a lot of what they talked about are in an article that Jack did earlier today over on GamecockCentral.com. We're also on social media at Gamecock Central. Wes and I just did a recruiting rundown 2 days ago, talking about the Texas A&M weekend and how South Carolina had a pretty great weekend when it came to recruiting. So check that out as well. Lots going on in the world of the Gamecocks. So much, because like I said, it's not just football season anymore. There's more sports getting in the mix here, basketball as well, which we are certainly looking forward to. We won't talk about what happened earlier in the week with basketball, but better days ahead, better days coming. So anyways, thanks everyone for joining us here on GC Live on this Wednesday afternoon here on Gamecock Central. For Jack Veltri, I'm Kendall Smith, and we will see you soon.